To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
A very special guest with us here today, Borge Brende. He's the president of the World Economic Forum here in India, and we're very, very pleased to be sitting down in conversation with you, especially Borge, as we've got a lot to look forward to with Davos just around the corner. And the fact that you're here in India meeting industry leaders, and I think the Prime Minister himself as well, tells us really how prominently India is now figuring on the world map. Tell us a little bit more about how things are changing post-COVID, how economies are now starting to come together to once again really look at the recovery and the pace of recovery going ahead.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be back in India. It's my first visit in 2 years, and it's also very interesting to see how fast the Indian economy is recovering. At the World Economic Forum, we do expect that India will grow with at least 10% next year. We're seeing that jobs are back. Of course, there are still challenges with the global value chains. We also see inflationary pressure even in India. But overall, we have a very bullish outlook for the Indian economy. And as you were also alluding to, there is a lot of interest in India. India is now the country that many are looking at, and also for playing a very important stabilizing role in a geopolitical landscape that is unfortunately more and more polarized.
When you talk about increased polarization, and we've seen, of course, the US-China tussle play out, but do you feel that perhaps things will now improve in terms of talks post-COVID? Are countries willing to look at things a little differently?
Very good question. I think in some areas we will see very tough competition also between nations in the years to come, especially on the new technologies, who's going to be on top of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, big data. But at the same time, it is in every nation's interest to collaborate and cooperate when it comes to common challenges. Look at COVID. COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere. Look at climate change. CO2 emissions doesn't travel with a passport. All these challenges we have to also look at in a multilateral way. But currently, there is not easy to make agreements because of the polarization, especially between the G2, China and the US. But at the same time, there will be no real economic recovery without the trade recovery and without investment recovery.
So let's talk about that for a moment. With the polarization that we're seeing between China and the US, do you expect that to get worse? How is that likely to impact other economies that are influential when it comes to the trade map?
So G2, China and US is more than 40% of the global economy. And that has huge impact on all of us. This trade war that is going on. But at the same time, we have seen even the last week that there is some positive development at COP26 in Glasgow. Secretary Kerry and Minister Xie did sign this common agreement between China and the US on how to deal with climate change in the future. We also know that President Biden and President Xi Jinping will have a virtual call next week. So I think they both, these big economies, see that there are areas where they will continue to have an extreme competition situation. In fact, President Biden used the term and coined the term that is an extreme competition between them. And there will be areas where they have interest in also collaborating. So I think this is something that will shape this century. And as an underlying factor, I think is tough competition regarding the new technologies. The most prosperous nations in this century will be those that are on top and control the new technologies, because they are like really so defining. And during the COVID, we saw the technologies being accelerating so fast. Just see e-commerce how many did not turn into e-commerce, buying on the internet, contrary to the traditional retail buying?
So which are the countries you see at the forefront of this change? And from a technology perspective, as well as, also benefiting perhaps with what's happening with US and China, do you see further investment into countries like India?
Indeed. India is then maybe the most exciting of the emerging economies. Okay. We do expect that, again, India will be the fastest growing economy of the emerging economies and the big economies too. Right. And I think this will continue. India has a lot of very well-educated young people, very tech-savvy. We know in the ITC business it's already quite leading on the services side. I think in the years to come, India will continue to undergo reforms, and I think we're looking at much more influential India geopolitically, but also economically. I think this country will make quantum leaps moving forward.
You talked a lot about climate change, and I want to, bring up India's agenda on that front as well, because we've made some significant announcements. As you know, the Prime Minister has talked about, hitting a net zero target by 2070. We have significant private players in this space that have also outlined very ambitious plans on the renewable energy front and green energy front. Do you feel that, again, in this respect, India is going to emerge as a very valid player when it comes to green energy and climate space? Do you see it being taken seriously in this respect post some of these announcements?
Indeed, and we already see a big renewable companies out of India, and what is happening in this field is just staggering. If we met 10 years ago in this room and I said that the price of solar would fall to 1/10, people would say, oh, he's very optimistic. And now we know that solar in many places in the world, without subsidies, outcompete traditional fossil fuel. We know that wind power has fallen the price to 1/7 compared to 10 years ago. So there is a lot of development that is very interesting to follow, a lot of business opportunities, a lot of jobs. But at the same time, we can't move from a fossil-based society from one day to another, because we also have the challenge that globally there is 1 billion people that are not even connected to modern electricity. So how do we square this circle? How do we make sure that people have access to energy at the right price, but we decouple this growth from growth in CO2 emissions? And here I think we need new technology breakthroughs. We have to be able, for example, to capture CO2 and store it. That's part of the technologies that we have to then also make commercial available.
Okay. Just going back to US and China for a moment, and while everyone perceives, of course, the fact that the US has stepped up the ante when it comes to the trade war, what do you think perhaps China could do in order to mend this relationship as well?
It takes two to tango.
Exactly.
And there has to be a willingness from both of them then to find solutions. But I don't think they will agree on everything moving forward, because there are different national interests.
Right.
But what we can hope for is that in some areas where the G2 really means a lot to also the rest of the world, look at economic growth, economic stability, trade, environment. There are areas where we all will benefit from the two countries collaborating. Also look at COVID-19 and future pandemics. The big nations of the world have to collaborate because many of the challenges we're faced with don't travel with passports.
Absolutely. Do you think we're well past the COVID-19 fear? I mean, while it still continues to run through certain countries as we speak, is the worst behind us? From what you're sensing, you speak to world leaders around the globe. How much of a threat do they still see it as, medically, of course, but also economically?
So it's really a tough question.
Yeah.
I hope we're over
Yes.
the worst, and there are very clear indications that we are. As long as people get vaccinated, they still can catch COVID. It can be breakthrough cases, but very rarely do you end up in hospital if you're vaccinated. And more of the global population is now vaccinated, but there are pockets still. Look at Africa, where only maybe 8% of the population of more than 1 billion are vaccinated. Right. So there are a lot of steps that have to be taken also moving forward, but the total lockdown situations were devastating also for the economy and also for health. And hopefully we have learned a lot from this pandemic, also to be better prepared in the future if there will be new breakouts and infections and pandemics.
So Davos, then, we're all looking forward to it,
yeah.
And it's great to see that it's going to be back. It sets the tone at the beginning of the year for the, for the economy, for business leaders around the world, and for how things are going to pan out. What's the key agenda going to be this time around?
So we will have to rebuild trust in the world. We have a situation where we have to collaborate more, even to get a successful recovery. If the trade conflicts continue, if there is increased protectionism, that will also have bad effect on global growth. It is too much like beggar your neighbor approach instead of prosper your neighbor approach. And we need to have a win-win approach. And I think the whole question of the heating of the planet and also the role of the private sector to set ambitious targets will be a major topic. I think another topic will be also jobs and skills. I think gender equality will also be an important topic. And the whole role of the business sector to also take more responsibilities, not only for and towards their stakeholders or to their to the owners, the shareholders, but also to have a broader approach where you take more responsibility for society at large. And we see that big change now in the attitude for many companies, and that is something that we would like to accelerate further.
Okay. And I know that you can't play favorites as such, but tell me, in terms of the emerging economies or even within some of the segments that you're talking about, whether it's sustainability, whether it's some of the other key agenda items, who are some of the players or countries that are emerging as a strong voice and that we should look forward to hearing this year?
So one of them is, of course, India. India is the fastest growing of the large economies. It's also the largest democracy in the world. And we are hoping to also be able to welcome back to Davos Prime Minister Modi. I'm meeting with the Prime Minister while I'm here. And I think there is a huge interest globally to hear more about India and also the positive recovery that India is in now. And geopolitically, we know that there is a lot of bailers for India. Many countries want to talk and see and understand because India has an increasingly important geopolitical and geo-economic role.
And you feel that the reforms that the Prime Minister has been actioning have all had a positive impact in terms of global investor perception?
I think a lot of the reforms have been important and timely. I think there is more reforms needed, of course, also in the Indian economy. It's all about increased productivity.
Right.
If you are able to increase your productivity, you will also down the line be able to increase your prosperity. And with the young population of India, there's so much needed investments in infrastructure, investments in education, and also what we're seeing on gender equality is very
Yeah.
important. So not everything is solved, but definitely India is on a good track for a recovery, and huge interest also to learn more. And I think you will see a lot of more investments coming to India too. But India is also a large investor itself in its neighborhood. If you look to, for example, the neighboring countries, but also globally, India is really a superpower when it comes to investments also.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to all that you have in store at Davos in 2022.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.